All right, so about our host, Matt Ray. He's a designer, advocate, and an XD instructor for Adobe, and he's based in Waterloo, Canada. And he's coming from nearly a decade in product design across travel, autonomous vehicles, ed tech, and advertising technology. And now he's focused on equipping designers with resources to design the best experiences using Adobe XD. He has a passion for user experience and developing the design community. So with that, I am going to pass this off to Matt.
Thank you. And you just saved me one slide of the presentation. That's perfect. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. So thank you for the introduction and thank you for having me here. Today we're going to talk a little bit about how you can use Adobe XD to really tell a more compelling story and kind of take design to the next level. And this is my background. Liz just covered this. I'm coming from a background across various different industries, working with industrial vehicles, education, advertising, a whole range of different experiences. The whole field of experiential design and graphic design is a new one to me, but it's fascinating. And I hope that we can cover some of the ways that XD can help you design those experiences and work with some of the other Creative Cloud tools as well. So for those of you not familiar with what XD is, it's really intended as the user experience design platform where teams can create amazing experiences at scale, or even the world's best experiences. And from what you can see in the tool, a lot of it is focused around kind of interface-based digital design, voice, but that's really where we're at today. And the focus in the long term is creating this UX experience design platform, really of the future. And so to achieve that, we're cross-platform. We have some different kind of preview apps on Android and iOS. We're going to get into a little bit about voice and sound, which is really a unique feature in XD. And then integrations with Creative Cloud. So if you're used to using Photoshop and Illustrator and other Creative Cloud tools, we'll talk about how XD can really expand on those and help you design these experiences. And then there's a number of plugins as well, which we won't cover too much today, but they are there so that they can really augment what you're doing in XD and augment the existing built-in features here. And I'm going to do my best throughout this to follow along on the chat. I'm going to keep it closed just so it's not in the way if it does show up. But I'll check in kind of at the end of each section. So if you do have questions, please put those in the chat. I'm going to find a good spot for Zoom to sit. There we go. And I'll try and answer questions along the way. So to kick things off, I'm coming from a background using a variety of different tools. I've mostly worked in Sketch in the past. I've done some work in Illustrator and Photoshop as well. And then working with autonomous vehicles, I've spent a fair bit of time in code, kind of experimenting with LED lighting, sound design, things like that. So really crossing a lot of different tools. One thing I really like about XD is that it's made the transition from other tools pretty straightforward and simple. So it's easy to open Sketch. I can pull in Illustrator and Photoshop files if they're coming from another team or older files that I've had. I can import them into XD pretty simply. And it does a really good job of it as well, especially Photoshop and Illustrator. And then with connections to CC libraries, I can really share assets across these different applications and use them for what their core strength is, right? So if I'm doing images, I'll probably stick to Photoshop. And for advanced vector editing, I'm going to stick with Illustrator. So we'll cover a little bit about that as well. And then I really want to, in this session, focus on a couple features that I think can really make XD powerful for this group. And the first one is Auto-Animate. So a lot of design tools in the past, unless you're talking Flash or Adobe Animate, have been fairly static, right? You're designing screens, you're designing layouts, or designing fairly static 3D models. Auto-Animate really helps kind of take things to the next level and create the interaction piece in design. So XD, for the most part right now, right, we're talking about 2D flat designs, but Auto-Animate can really enhance those using these micro interactions that we're going to get into, and can help you like really rapidly prototype some of these bigger experiences that might be digital displays or in-person interactions. We can kind of create those on a smaller scale using Auto-Animate. And then the next one is voice and sound. So again, this is a very unique feature to XD. Competitors in the market don't have this, and it's really been powerful seeing what teams and companies can create, designing out virtual assistants, designing for accessibility using voice and sound. And so we'll talk about that and show you what is possible. And again, the examples we're going to cover are fairly basic. I can't even begin to capture what some of the work that all of you do. And we're also going to try and just cover those topics. We'll skip over some of the basics, but I wanted to call out Let's XD. If you are new to XD, of course, we're in about the hour range here. There's only so much we can cover. So if you are looking to learn more, Let's XD is a great resource for getting started, learning some of the basics like the tool panel, how to create basic interactions and do design in here. But if you are familiar with other Creative Cloud tools, this should be a pretty straightforward pickup. You might have some different shortcuts and whatnot, but just walking you through, this is Let's XD. There's a ton of resources here if you're looking to get started, some examples. Again, mostly interface based, but you can really extrapolate those out to other experiences. And this getting started guide is kind of your bare bones, learn it all really quickly. And then if you go to guides, you'll get to some more use case based examples that is ever growing. We're adding about 3 or 4 a week. So it's a great place to check out. And with that, we can jump in to XD. You'll notice right away, we're already in XD here for the presentation. I really like using XD, may be biased a little bit for presentations, just because of those same features. The Auto-Animate can make my presentations really pop. Think of it kind of as magic move from Apple Keynote, but it's in the context of where I'm designing. So I don't have to copy and paste vectors and have them show up as PNGs. Everything is just the raw design file that I'm working with in my presentation. And so when I'm trying to articulate a design concept or tell the story or a narrative around a design, being able to do it right in XD is super powerful. And then I can also capture and record right in here. So if I'm walking through an experience, I can just hit record, turn on the microphone and talk through it. And then I have an asset that's shareable, whether I'm sharing it asynchronously through Slack or just a link in Google Drive. I can share that concept out really easily and not have to fumble around with other software. It's just all built into XD, which I really enjoy quite a bit. So with that, again, we're going to kind of focus in on some different examples. So the first one I have is this idea of creating visualizations. So I poked around on some of the awards, some of the different projects that have been done by the SEGD group. These are visually nowhere near what has been created, but I want to articulate some of the kind of categories of where XD can be powerful. And so the first one is, if you think of this as some sort of interactive display, maybe you're walking through and there's a set of visualizations. So this could be showing data of a certain event. I mean, it all circulates around data. I can keep giving examples, but we'll just dive in. So what we have here is really a simulation. So I've essentially got this background layer. I've got an image behind to represent a room. And then I've just added a background blur to the object here. It's locked, so I can't edit it. And then I really want to show here how Auto-Animate can help bring this to life. In other tools, you might be kind of stringing together these different artboards with different states and maybe doing a simple dissolve between them if you are prototyping it. But with Auto-Animate, we can take this to the next level. So quick orientation here. In XD, you have 3 tabs up top: Design, Prototype, and Share. This makes it really easy to jump between design and prototype right in a single app. And there are hotkeys for this. And then in design, along the left panel, you have various shapes and tools, all with their own hotkeys. So this is just a series of rectangles and text, much like you could do in Illustrator. And then I have this chart. So you can also picture this. We're going to do an import in a couple examples from Illustrator, but you can picture this as pulling in assets from Illustrator too, and just having these raw layers. And if you open up this layers panel, the second icon here on the bottom left, that's just going to open up and show you all the artboards. So if I click into this, it's going to contextually give me all my layers. I don't have any kind of docking, any disconnected panels. Everything's here, but it's all contextual to what I'm doing. So I don't really need to worry about hiding and showing menus. It'll handle it for me. So you can see I've done a terrible job at naming layers, but that's okay. That's not the point here. What I want to show is building out a simple interaction here. So when I click on a section of the pie chart, I can essentially make the interface move around and animate and reveal more information. So from here, I have 2 different interaction points. I could click on the menu on the left, or I could actually click on the chart. And so we can do something here. If I just copy out this artboard, the key to Auto-Animate is using similarly, or the exact same name, not even similar, the exact same name layers. So in this case, we have path 9442, and let's see, it's named the same here because we made a copy of it. So if I did something simple like resize this pie chart section and gave it a shadow, then in theory, Auto-Animate is going to essentially transition between the properties in this state to this state. And we'll just do a simple tap. So if I go to prototype mode, I can click and drag on this little blue arrow. I'll use tap as a trigger. So I'll try and zoom in here. So we have tap. If I come down and set my transition type to Auto-Animate, I can then set my destination. It's already set because I dragged this icon. And then I have all these easing controls as well. So I'm just going to leave it as is for now. We have a duration of 0.3 seconds. And I'm going to then set a link back. XD is going to remember my settings, so I don't have to worry about that. And when I play this up in the top, because I set it on the artboard, I can click anywhere on the screen. We'll show you how to make that a little bit more granular. But when I click on that, XD is going to do that animation. Really, very little effort on my part. I just strung things together, and automatically I have this nice interactive chart. And I can go ahead and add other content and change how it looks. So that's super basics. I'm now just going to delete those links here. And we're going to do something extra cool here. So what I really want to show is I want the rest of that chart to kind of fade away. And I want to highlight that green section when it's tapped on and show some text. So this is good. We've got our shapes. Maybe I'm going to actually reposition these elements a little bit. I'm going to slide them off to the side. And what I can do is really just start manipulating all the properties. So maybe I'll dial them back. Maybe this is going to just show up here. And again, it's got all the same names and whatnot. Maybe I'll add a border here to make it really stand out. And again, I'm not the graphic designer here, so this is not a lesson in visuals. And then what I like to do when I'm doing Auto-Animate is I might kind of rough in the end state, but then I need to remember to go back and add layers to the previous. So let's say we're going to add a percentage. This is maybe 10%, keep it simple. And again, all our layers are contextual here. So you saw some more text controls pop up. I'm just going to set this to a dark color. We can resize it like this. And I'll paste it. So now I've got the same layer control. I'm going to paste it here maybe. And then in this case, I want it to kind of animate in and follow this object. So all the animations in XD are essentially linear, right? So you're not going to modify things around a curve. They're really moving from point A to point B and size A to size B. You can think of it that way. So if this object's moving over here, I'm going to keep it somewhat similar. I'm going to shrink it down and just place it in the middle and reduce the opacity. So it's still starting like this. And then I'm just going to start my prototyping link on the actual object itself, so that if we picture a physical touch screen, if I go and touch on that, it's going to do the transition for me rather than doing the full artboard. So we'll just click on this, go Auto-Animate, and then I want some closeout. So maybe I'll just click on this background object to close out of the animation. So now what we're going to have is this nice animation that's going to transition. So you can picture I tapped on it, and now when I tap away, the pie chart's going to come back. I can go ahead and add some body text here. So let's say I add a paragraph. I'm going to go to design mode, click on the text tool, and then add a paragraph. I probably don't want it 100 pixels. Let's go 20, see how that looks. And I can build out paragraph text. I'm just going to copy and paste this for now, but this could be an actual description of something. And what I can do is I can change this to an area text. So I can fix it to a specific area. This is maintaining a ridiculous line height. So let's set that. Oops. There we go. So I can pull in this paragraph text and I can set it, if I know I want it about here, I'm going to copy and paste that. So I have the same text in two locations. Actually, in this case, I would want to start it here. And let's actually bump that up to 40. There's nice controls here. So if I double click on that red, it's going to auto size the box for me in both directions. So let's go with that. So I'm going to copy, paste that again, turn down the opacity here. And now what this is going to do is just create a nice dissolve on the text when I complete this interaction. So just like that, I now have a really simple micro interaction on a digital display where I can show these metrics. I can also link that into these controls here, right? And I might want to show some selection. So in this case, perhaps these turn down. I probably want these as groups, but for now, we'll keep it simple. So maybe those will be set to 25. And then again, I can just go to prototype mode and add a new link. And because it's remembered my settings, I don't really have to do anything. So again, now I can click on this point and trigger that same interaction. Super simple, nice and easy. And then you can also do visualizations with loading. So for instance, if we took this same chart, I'll go this way. We could do a timed loading transition. So when an experience loads up, you can have a chart kind of appear. So depending on how you want to do that, you might want to change the chart. And to build this chart, all I did was used a little plugin called VisiCharts, where you can enter in data, you can load CSVs, and create these different experiences. So let me actually show you that over here. I'm going to clear out the chart here. And I'm just going to create a line chart. So I can just select an object here. I have a sample. And actually, let's go with a column chart. So again, we have our sample here. I'm going to create well, we can change the color. Because they're all vector elements, we can just change them in XD. Pretty simple by selecting them. So if this is my end state, right, if this is what I want a chart to be, what I can do is, if I wire this up, I can go artboard to artboard using a time trigger. So using this, I can set a delay. So let's say after 2.2 seconds, that's going to trigger an animation that's going to move to this next artboard. And at this point, it's going to do nothing, right? It's not going to show me anything because it's the exact same. But what I can do, if I go back to design mode, I can select all of these bar chart items. I can globally set their height to 0 pixels. Oh, you don't need pixels. You just hit 0. There we go. And you'll see they're all over the place now. So I can just use my alignment tools. I'll align them to the bottom and maybe shift them back down to that bottom axis. So we're in a good place. So now what's going to happen, I have that time trigger. Maybe I'll just add a tap back so that we can see where it's going. I'll set that to tap. So now when I play, just like that, you can see that all the charts animate and they'll just load up like that. So you can add those pieces of interaction and really get a feel for how an experience might look before you go and build any code or put it into a complicated animation application. You can just do those point A to point B transitions and get a good feel. So that's a quick look at the kind of a visualization approach. The next one I want to look at, I've seen a number of kind of interactive displays. And one example was really this grid system that people can interact with and touch and maybe spell something out. There's many different examples of those where people are interacting with a giant display. So before you go and create that, obviously that's an expensive thing to do. You can kind of prototype out these screen interactions really easily with something called component states. And so components in XD, if you've used any kind of UI design tool like Sketch or Figma or XD, they all use a similar idea of components, which is just a reusable element that can then be repeated throughout a design. The added benefit in XD is that these components can have different states or variations. So one element can be reused and you can select different versions of it to display. So one example of that is buttons. So if we, well, let's see, we already had buttons here. So I'll just copy this and just show you how to make a component. So if I wanted to reuse this button, I would just come right click and make component or use Command K, Control K on Windows if you're using Windows. And just like that, now I have this component and that's going to show up in an assets panel down here. So all of these things can be reused. And for example, I have a little logo here. So if I wanted to bring in some branding into my mockup, this is a little logo. I can drop that in and call this, maybe this is my experience wall. So just like that, I can pull these assets in and you can see right here, I have two different components. This is my main because it's filled in diamond. This is an instance or a copy or a child, however you want to refer to that. So any change I make to this main component is going to reflect in the instance until I override that particular property in an instance. So I can now have a pink instance and a blue one. If I change that background of the main, it's not going to reflect. But if I change a text style, maybe I'm going to set this to medium or something else that looks more significantly changed, semi-condensed. So now as I change that, that property is still going to modify. I can still change border properties, things like that. So that's the basics of components. What I can also do is add in a state. So I can add any state. We have a pre-configured hover state option, which just comes pre-linked. So this is good for interfaces. And these basically work like keyframes. So when I have one selected, I'm editing that state. So maybe I'll just make this darker. This is not on an artboard yet. There we go. So now I can preview this, and I'll just set this back to the default. When I hover over with my mouse, it's pre-configured and I have that interaction. But what this means is that I can use states to create selected states, click states, and I can have multiple of them, and I can prototype between the states. So what I've done here on this screen is, if I picture this as a giant kind of wall with a bunch of squares or a grid, I could set components with states into those grids and have certain interaction capabilities included in them. Now, I can also override prototyping links on each instance, which might be getting complicated. But that allows me to set custom destination, there's custom interactions to states, all from in a component. So to keep it simple, I've created one component here, this little square component, and you can see it has a default and a selected. So when I click on selected, it just changes the fill, makes it brighter, adjusts the border a little bit. And if I go to prototype mode, I can see I already have a tap with an auto-animate going to the destination of selected state. So that means that when this is previewed and I click on that, it's just going to transition between the two states. That auto-animate that we just saw in action with the charts is now working with this grid. So now that I have that set up, I want to populate that across the whole thing. So I could copy and paste this, kind of position it, nudge it over with all the pixels, or I could just use repeat grid, which is pretty straightforward. It repeats a grid. So if I turn that on, you'll get these two little handles. And I can just click and drag on that, and it's going to repeat the objects for me across the screen. So if I do that for the full length, I can then zoom in. I'll zoom in here and adjust the spacing. So maybe I want to bring this down to like -1 or 2, just so the borders overlap. And then I can finish dragging that out and fill the screen. I can also go down and adjust it all. And now in a couple drags, I now have this giant screen grid of component states. So what this looks like, I only have this one artboard, but in that one artboard, I can now pretty much mock up a full interactive display where I'm clicking on tiles and changing their state. So I can then interact. Maybe I display this on a giant or a slightly larger touchscreen to test with, and I don't have to write any code. It's all kind of built in, and I can do this. Now, another use case is maybe I want to reveal something behind. So rather than a fill, perhaps on that state, remember, I'm still editing the main component here. So if I go to the selected state, I've now changed everything, but I could then instead just turn off the fill. So I still my default and my selected, but now I could essentially put an image behind. So if I come back and select this image, I can nest that behind. I'm going to do something here. I'll put it in with the screen. and I'm just going to mask it with the screen. So again, we have all our elements, but if I click on this and change to the selected state, you can see now it's going to start revealing that image because tiles are actually transparent when selected. And you can play with the border and whatnot. But what this means is now as I select, I'm slowly revealing an image behind the screen. And people might be able to come by, tap on a screen. And again, you can just mock that up, get a feel for maybe how big your tiles are or how far they should be spaced apart, and really start putting together that interaction. So that's a quick little look at like an interactive tile display. Again, if you have questions or you've done similar experiences and want to know how things should be done or the best practice, please drop those in the chat. For the sake of time, I'll keep going here and show some other interesting examples. So in this case, I have a floor plan. I've pulled that in from Illustrator. So all I have to do to pull this in, maybe I've drawn this out in Illustrator or imported a CAD file into Illustrator and I want to work with it. Maybe I have a interactive exhibit or something, or this is a digital map. There's a couple different approaches I can use where I might have this map. So rather than just keeping the flat Illustrator image, I could then take this into XD and start adding some elements. So let's go ahead with the use case of this is a digital map experience perhaps. And when I click on certain things, I want new elements to appear on a screen. Or I could even mock up kind of what a lighting example might be just by interacting with the chart. So we'll go with the digital display. All I have to do on a Illustrator file is when I go to downloads, I have this floor plan file. I can just right click and go open with XD. And then it's going to pull it in as an artboard right into my XD file. Actually, that's not true. If I do it that way, it's going to open in a new XD file. If I go from XD, file import, I can just show you right here. We have the floor plan file. I can import that, and it's just going to pull it in as a new artboard. So you can see it here at the bottom of the design. And all these elements are interactive and editable, just like they would be in a regular XD file. So this is the same artboard. I just imported it earlier. What I can do is I can start building in those elements that are going to make this an interactive object. So I can take an ellipse. Maybe I'm just going to put little hotspots. Let's say, let's make them green. And I can just, I could make these components if I wanted to. For this, I'm not going to, but I can just start highlighting my rooms and kind of put these markers down. You don't need markers. You can just use a general area. I'm just using them to draw attention to it. So what I want to happen is when I click on one of these, I kind of want the floor plan to zoom in and show me again some information, kind of like what we did with the visual charts. So I'm just going to again copy this artboard and paste it. And let's say when I click on this one, I want it to zoom into this room and then pull up a panel where I can display some information. So again, I'm going to just wire this up. So when I click on this, it's going to come to this artboard. It's going to be a tap with an Auto-Animate. Maybe let's get funky and do a snap. And then when I click on the artboard, maybe I'll have a close button or a back, and then it can come back and it'll just tap. So again, this is going to do nothing if we play this right now because they're the exact same. But if I come to design mode and start kind of taking this design, the power of responsive resize, so you'll see in this layout control, responsive resize is designed to automatically help you resize elements. So we'll see how it does in auto here. I'm just going to hold shift to lock in my constraints. We were talking about this before, how Photoshop has changed this. XD still uses shift to constrain proportions. So as I click and drag on it, I can resize everything together. If I really want to get funky with it, I can give it a little rotation. And then since it's all selected, I can just drag it all in place. So I'm going to have a panel come in from the right, I think. So I'll just position it like that. So now what you'll see is when we play this and click on this dot, I can click anywhere else and it's not going to do anything. When I click on that dot, it's now going to snap. And when I click away, it'll snap back. Not sure why there's that delay. Did I set something wrong? Nope. Okay. Yeah, just like that. Now I've got this interaction. And what I can do is I can start adding in those other elements using the rectangle. I'll start on the end design and just show kind of where I want it to appear. Perhaps this one's going to be a gradient. So I can, in the color picker, I can change my gradients. Super simple interface, really. And that's the goal. We're trying to keep it lean. Oh, my eyes are going, I don't know what's straight here. That looks close. So we'll just do this. We'll tile down the opacity a little bit, pull this over so we can kind of get a feathered edge. And again, I'll copy and paste this. So let's give this a proper name, sidebar. So I'm going to copy that and paste it onto this artboard. Whenever I select artboards, I can just paste objects in their position they were copied from. And so that's great. It's here, but I don't want it to show up. So I can actually slide it almost off the artboard. You don't want to slide it all the way off unless it's part of a group. As long as something from a group is still in contact with the artboard, it'll remain on there. So now we'll play this. I've dialed down the transparency, moved it off. So now when I click on that, that should snap into place as well. So now I have this nice information panel where I can add text and other information, photos, things like that. The thing to note about Auto-Animate is that everything is kind of animating together. There's not a timeline yet. So controlling things, you kind of have to get a little bit creative. But one way to do that is if you want this to snap into place later, you can take it, I'll copy and paste it here so it's the same. But then you can apply a time transition or a time delay from the artboard. So this first interaction, it'll snap into place and go to this view. Then from here, I can add in a time trigger and set a delay. So maybe half a second later, let's do an ease in, ease out interaction. And then again, I can adjust this. I can pull it into place, give it some color. And so now what happens, and I probably want a nice click back here. So I'll select this, this group again. Oops. Prototype mode. What's going on there? From here, I'll click this back to square one. We'll do tap, auto-animate. We'll set that back to snap. And so now we can kind of complete the experience. So that first tap, it's going to do this zoom in, and then the panel will slide in. So that's how you can kind of stage animations at this point in XD. And then when I click away, it should zoom back just like that. Because I've kept elements on the artboards, it's super simple to do those stages. And then I can build those out for each of these different elements, right, with different zoom levels. And the easiest way to do that is to kind of copy these, not move them. And then just kind of adjust your shaping here. So I'll select all these objects. Maybe in this case, we'll switch it and I'll zoom in over here. And then I can just copy that and really paste it in here. And then using layers, I can adjust things and just move it back under that sidebar. So then we've got a little bit of a weird grid going on here, but you can fix that pretty easily. So then prototype mode, we'll just come here instead and do a snap with a tap. This should already, no, then we'll want to hook this up with a time. And we can do that. And then when we click on this, we'll come back to that home screen with a tap and a snap. So now you'll have two different avenues. So we have that first one with a nice time. I can click out of that, and then I can interact with this map slowly. I had a stray element there that was not named properly. That's why it kind of shot off screen. But yeah, just like that, you can get into this interactive map experience. Now, you can also do this if you're trying to lay out a physical exhibit, and you could highlight and prototype out different things like lighting or sound even. We won't cover that here just because we're down to the wire on time, and I want to show you voice. Real quickly, I'll show you. This is not really an exhibit example, but this is a mapping example. So using something called scroll groups, which is found up here, you can actually create these pannable or scrollable areas. So it's great for horizontal scrolling. It's great for vertical scrolling, but I really like it for map experiences. So this could be a giant screen again or something where you're moving through a map application or any pannable canvas, frankly. And if I click in here, you can see this map is actually much larger than what is shown in the viewport. And what I've done is I've just enabled this scroll group area, this horizontal and vertical scroll. And so if I enable that, it's going to snap in these guides that I can drag. I can readjust a viewport. And this is now my pannable canvas where I can click around, drag, I can use my scroll wheel and navigate through the interface, all from a single artboard. I don't need multiple. I don't need to code anything. It's just this nice viewport. And then I can use states so you can see I already have these hovers set up. And if I had a click, I have a selected state on them too. And that's just repeated throughout the map. So the same experience can be had on each of these little waypoints, which is super nice, super easy to set up. Then finally here, we'll take a look at voice and sound. So these are just a little snippet from an Alexa UI kit that is available for XD. And how voice works is it's very similar to the others. It's just a different trigger. So if you look up here, we experimented with tap and time. You can also use keys and gamepad. So if you plug in a Bluetooth, Xbox, or PlayStation controller, you can map keys from that into the prototyping experience in XD, which is really great if you're prototyping like a game experience or something with a controller. And then you can obviously map keys from the keyboard as well, so that if you're doing any kind of unique experience, you could set up a keyboard key to that kind of acts as a button and make the prototype do something. And then voice is the other one, along with drag. And voice works using commands. So you can see on here, we have this try Alexa open world travel guide call to action. So I've just mapped that here. You can actually stack voice commands. So if I hit this plus, I can add more voice commands with different command text so that you can capture a broader kind of grouping of commands and different pronunciations, or if somebody's really polite and says please versus someone who's just like give me this, you can capture those a little bit better with stacking voice commands. But how they work is just the same. I have one link to this other artboard. I've set up the command and I have a transition to a certain destination. I can adjust my animations. So I've just kept it as a simple slide left. You can, of course, use Auto-Animate. And then you can control all your animation timing. So the way this works is when I hit play on the computer, I hold spacebar on the keyboard to say the command. So that's how it is set up right now. There fortunately isn't a customization on that to date. I know the team is aware of some requests to have different commands for initiating the voice. But right now, I'm just going to hold spacebar and then say the command, and you'll see it transition. I'll keep my hands up and hold the spacebar here so that you know, oh, virtual backgrounds don't work with that. All right, never mind. But I'm not using any other commands. I'm just going to hold the spacebar. Alexa, open World Travel Guide. So it does a pretty good job at understanding how a command is written. Let's check out the chat. Yeah, super cool. And so it kind of read that punctuation. It can also guess. So if you only get part of it, it can also kind of predict that and put things together. But how you write it is pretty important. So here, I think I also have something set up about Cuba, but it doesn't actually match this. So if I say, Alexa, tell me more about Cuba. Okay, so maybe that one did match. If we click on here, we can see I have one set up that matches that. But then this one says open pyramids in Mexico. So I can kind of navigate through. Alexa, tell me more about Cuba. And then if I go back, I can say, Alexa, go open pyramids in Mexico. You can see I still stumbled through the sentence a little bit, but it still got it, even though I was saying other things just before the command. So you can do that, which is great. Let me quickly see if I can. I'll share my computer sound. Hopefully nothing loud happens. But I want to show the other piece of this. So now that I've had a voice command go to this artboard here, I can also add actions. So after a certain amount of time, in this case, right away, I'm going to set a audio or speech playback. So to start with speech, I can choose a voice and I can have it say, welcome to Cuba. What would you like to explore? If I had more actions here, I can actually build a full-on voice trigger, voice feedback interface that really needs no interaction other than the spacebar. So I'll show you what this sounds like if we come back to here. Alexa, tell me more about Cuba.
Welcome to Cuba. What would you like to explore?
So hopefully you heard that come through. And the nice thing is you can do speech or audio. So let's see, I've got some sounds here. If I switch this over to audio playback instead, I can add a new file. Oh, that didn't help me, did it? No need to have a Finder window open. We got, so you can play full on sounds if you want, right? Like audio sounds. Where did I put my sound kit now? There we go. But you can also pull in different things like these dings and different sounds from interfaces. So let's import that. It'll just add it in. And then just like the speech playback, Alexa, tell me more about Cuba. And then it'll play the sound once that transition is complete. So that's super powerful. There's like a lot that you can go through and do. So if you picture like an audio experience, you can technically set this up to be a full-on sound or a song file. I wonder what Dream Lagoon is. Yeah, that sounds nice. So I can add that, and then as I transition to another artboard or hit another action, I can stop it from playing. So I don't have it set up here. Alexa, tell me more about Cuba. But now I have this audio playing in the background that I've triggered from Prototype. And if I had pause controls, I can fire all of those up so that I can control that audio. Not actually, but I can stop it. Basically, the audio will stop when you transition to another screen. So you can create a prototype based around that and really do a fully audio-driven, sound-driven experience right in XD. So on that, I know we've got some chats coming in. So I'll open chat up and yeah. So we can take a look at these questions.
So Matt, this was amazing. I think everybody's blown away with what Adobe XD can do. And I think we're all just thinking of the amazing possibilities for what we can use on our clients' projects, but then also to sell the clients on our design concepts and presentations. I hate to do this because I would love to continue the conversation, but I know some people have to run. So what
Sure.
I'm going to recommend is, first of all, thank you to Adobe XD for sponsoring today, and to you, Matt. This was just fantastic and so insightful. I could imagine people itching for more information. So what we're going to recommend, let me go ahead and share my screen real quick. And so here is Matt's Twitter handle. Matt, if there's another way you want people to get a hold of you with questions, feel free to shout that out now.
Sure, I can put my email, good email in here. Let's hope I spell it right. You can connect with me through that email as well if you have any questions about how to do this. Obviously, this is scratching the surface of what is possible and what kind of experiences you're all designing. So always happy to answer questions.